On today's episode of The Consultancy Edge, I speak with Colleen McKenna. Now, a few years ago, when I went looking for a LinkedIn expert to help with my own strategy, I interviewed some pups, let me tell you. I interviewed so many so-called LinkedIn experts who knew less than I did about the platform. And then, finally, after kissing so many frogs, I arrived at Colleen's door, and let me tell you, what she doesn't know about LinkedIn is not worth knowing. We had a great chat about how LinkedIn still offers so much value to consultancy leaders, her own journey in consultancy and how LinkedIn has helped her, how to effectively use it to network with the right people and reach the right prospects, and also what the future of LinkedIn looks like as well. We had a fascinating chat, and I can't wait for you to hear exactly that. So let's get into it. Hey there, and welcome to the Consultancy Edge. Colleen from Intero Advisory. How are you? Great to see you again.
Great to see you, Matt. Love to have the opportunity to talk with you today.
Fantastic. Now, listen, I think it's fair to say, in all of my many years of working with consultancies, and especially on their sort of marketing and their positioning and how they're using their brands to get out into the world. First off, a lot of them are very backwards in coming forwards. They're very reserved, and there's a bit of trepidation about putting themselves out there. And the other thing that comes up time and time again is LinkedIn as a channel. The questions are all over the place around how should I be using it better? Is it the right thing to do? I'm hearing it's noisy. LinkedIn is dead. All of those stories that we're hearing from various directions. Um, Tell us your very unique viewpoint on LinkedIn for consultancy before we get into the main meat of it.
It's such a great question. I actually think the range of proficiency in LinkedIn is greater than it was even 13 years ago when I started the business. And I get all those questions all the time. Inevitably, I do think we come back to it is a critical channel. I don't consider LinkedIn social media. So my tagline is it's business, not social, right? So I talk to CEOs and entrepreneurs and business owners, those who run consultancies in the United States all the time about think about it as a business tool. You need to be there because even the people who say they don't use LinkedIn regularly or proactively vet people all the time in LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it.
And so
And
you have to be there.
yeah, we've talked about it as networking, of course. And I think a lot of us, and whether this is, an element of the pandemic that's maybe creeped in over the years, but I think we've fallen out of that method of networking that we used to do as business people very often. And I think perhaps the landscape of networking has changed, and we've forgotten that LinkedIn is just that. It's connecting with people that may be strangers for starters, but of course, then we've got an opportunity to strike up that conversation and explore any opportunities for not just sales, which I know a lot of people default to, but also collaboration and partnerships and mutual reward and referral and everything else that comes with it as well.
Absolutely. I think it's first identifying why do you want to be on the platform, right? And what is the objective? Is it to build the largest network that you can because you're trying to build social influence? Or is it to build a more discerning, referral-based network, if you will? So I've never been about building the biggest network because you end up with an address book. And considering the work that I do and I've been doing for the last 13 years, probably have one of the smallest networks of anyone who says they're a LinkedIn trainer and consultant. And it is purposeful, right? Because it was built with the intention that it would become a referral engine. I didn't need to build social influence. I needed to build influence within my network so I would get the next referral, right? And so when you think about how do we use this tool, we have to kind of think about first what our goal is. Do we want to build our brand? Do we want to move into thought leadership? And whatever that turns out to be, then that drives the activity that you take, right? Now, for some CEOs, it may just be that they just need to build that presence so that, again, they show up well, which is a reflection on their company, right? So is LinkedIn noisier? Oh, absolutely, more than ever. So what I tell people is if it's too noisy for you, there's another place that you should go, and that would be LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you've, of course, on that networking vibe, one of the great things you taught me, and as I said in the introduction, I mean, I've not met anybody with such a breadth and depth of knowledge of LinkedIn as you. But you brought to me this concept of centers of influence. Speak for a little bit, if you would, about and explain that to our listeners, and the concept and the benefit, the beneficial way in which you use that.
Yeah. So one of the first things that we do with every client is once they look good on LinkedIn, because right, the number one piece of content on LinkedIn is really the profile. What does it say about you? How do you project? How are you approachable? Uh, and how is that more than just an online resume, but a marketing tool? Is we look at your network, because you can, everybody's talking about, oh, we need content, we need content. But if we're putting content out there and it doesn't resonate with our network, our audience on LinkedIn, we're not going to get any engagement. We're not going to see what everybody's saying should be happening on LinkedIn. So we download the network, which, by the way, is a great backup exercise. And everybody should be doing that, because if something happens to someone's account, you want that backup. That's the juice. So we download it and we start looking at it. And what are the categories that are relevant to the person? So for example, clients, prospects, referral partners, alumni, your alumni network, professional associations, friends, right? Just friends from your neighborhood, or, the hobbies that you have. And then we want to look at COIs, centers of influence. And this is your inner circle, the innermost circle of your professional network, if you will. So these are people who know, like, and trust you. You know, like, and trust them. They have a good network. They know how to use LinkedIn. Now, could someone be a COI and they just don't use LinkedIn? Of course, right? But we do want to find those 12 to 15 people. If somebody sends me a list of 40 COIs, I'm like, okay, let's look at this again. Who's really, like, let's get it down to under 20. And these are the people that you should be networking with on a regular basis with intention, right? Who can I introduce you to? Hey, can you introduce me to some people? And rather than saying to people, a lot of times people will say, who can I introduce you to? Or, if you know anybody, let me, I'm happy to make an introduction. It's like too broad. Most people don't even know who they're connected to. So what I recommend is, let's identify those COIs. If they have an open network on LinkedIn so that we can see all of their connections, we can go in and we can put the parameters, the filters on that make sense for who we actually want to connect with, right? People mean well, but how many times do we get introductions that are just really not qualified, right? These are not ideal connections or business opportunities for us. So rather than put that onus on that person, let's go to them and say, hey, here's 6 people. Do you know them well enough to create an introduction? Or, hey, you know what? It's been a while since we've done this exercise together. How can I help you? Let's be intentional.
Yeah, it doesn't get any more specific than that. And I love that. I've experienced that myself, obviously, since we spoke. But others coming to me, and when they get really specific on who they do their best work with, you can call that to mind. If it's a very, very tight persona, but this is a different level. If you're saying that I recognize this person as being a potentially great connection for me, how well do you know them? And I guess that's the other thing, isn't it, Colleen? Because sometimes, as you said, we make connections from different spheres and different parts of our lives. And also, I get the feeling a lot of people out there would have accepted a bunch of connection requests from people that they don't really know. So I guess that's just a reminder for us, perhaps, to warm up some of those introductions. And as I say, sometimes not be a connection collector necessarily, but create some sort of connection there.
Absolutely. I think that we are moving away from just connecting with everybody. And I know that the majority, the very vast majority, if not all of the clients that we work with, the CEOs that we work with, they're very selective on who they connect with, right? And a lot of them are very wary because they say every time I connect with somebody, they want a meeting, right? So we've got to understand how we're coming across, and LinkedIn is not a direct selling channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just isn't. So it's kind of a little bit going back. I'm a LinkedIn purist, kind of going back to the days of when LinkedIn, early days of LinkedIn, when we were more thoughtful about it. The other part is I'm really almost taking a little bit of another contrarian perspective, in that know the people you're connecting with, because LinkedIn last year took down something like 20 million fake profiles.
Wow.
That's just that they took down. That doesn't mean that's all there is, right? And we want to be careful, because especially if you have built even somewhat of an intentional network, you don't want these, fake profiles. Who knows what's happening, right? You want to be mindful and thoughtful about how you're protecting the integrity of your network.
Yeah, no, that's a really
I think
good
it's
point.
important.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Okay. Colleen, I'm very conscious as well that the beauty of having you as one of our first guests on the Consultancy Edge is that not only are you an expert in an area that can obviously serve our consultancy leaders out there in a really, really big way, but you are a consultancy leader yourself. So I'd love to find out more about your consultancy journey. What was the pivotal moment that made you decide to venture into this world of consultancy?
Well, it was the end of 2010, and I was in a very mature traditional industry. I was in the printing industry and ran a sales team, and I lost my job. And I thought for about 2 weeks, what shall I do now? And I decided that I was not going to work for anyone else. And so with one daughter going into college and two more about to go into college, I was like, I got to figure this out very quickly. And I had come out also of what at the time was called custom publishing content, right?
Hmm.
I was a big fan of HubSpot, and I thought, well, I'll become a HubSpot reseller. And that was 2011 in Baltimore, Maryland. And HubSpot was pretty early on in those days, and no one would talk about content as a driver in Baltimore. I was like, okay, well, that's not going to work. And however, I started networking because I did a lot of networking that first year, and really in the first 90 days. And people would say to me, you seem to know this a lot about LinkedIn. Can you come talk to my networking group? Can you talk to my sales team? I was like, sure. And what I learned, and then I'd come home at the end of the day, and I'd log into HubSpot and I'd log into LinkedIn, and one was changing faster than the other, but they were both changing. And I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep up with both of them because they were really changing so dramatically. And so I'm like, I think I can drive revenue much faster with LinkedIn. And so I just really focused on LinkedIn. I kept the HubSpot piece going and really employed a lot of its methodology, right? Inbound, right? And content. But that was really a pretty pivotal moment. And it was about 90 to 120 days. I thought, wow, people are curious enough. It was just when LinkedIn was hitting its tipping point and people were trying to figure it out. And I would get calls, and CEOs would have their arms crossed and they would say, I don't like social media. And I was like, great. What if we talk about something that can really be seen as a business tool and not social media? Can we have a conversation? And you would literally, I could watch their nonverbal change. And so then I realized, okay, I have to approach this not as a social media tool or agency. And people told me I was completely wrong in that. I said, I'm just going to focus on LinkedIn and really talk about it as a business tool. And that was the beginning of the tagline, it's business, not social. So I listened a lot. I talked to a lot of people in that first 6 months for sure.
Incredible. I know that niching like that, Colleen, can really scare a lot of people. But when you go niche on proposition, whether you're going niche on the kind of clients that you want to do your best work with as well, it can be very, very scary. You do feel like you're excluding large swathes of the market. And you chose very early on, faced with that choice between HubSpot and LinkedIn. Just the realization that was too much to take on to really be expert in both of them. What other kind of challenges came your way in those early stages that you had to kind of hit head on, and how did you push on past those?
Yeah, so something that you just said was definitely a challenge. Some people even niched down even more, right? I'm only doing LinkedIn for attorneys or in professional services companies. And a lot of people said to me, oh, you should only just focus on women. And I didn't niche down at all beyond LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so in the early days, people would say, well, how does it work? How does LinkedIn work for manufacturing? How does it work for nonprofits? What are your case studies? How can you prove that this is actually going to work? So we basically had to say, you know what? I'm talking about best practices related to building a presence, a network, and participation. And because if I moved up to that level, no matter what button changed within LinkedIn, I was pretty certain we'd be okay, right? And so not niching into particular industries, and we have worked in industries from as varied as healthcare research to oil and gas and electrical distribution, some very, very both mature and very specific industries. And I found that much more interesting than just niching down to the industry level, because I could talk about what was happening in these different industries, and I could apply them across industries. So that was a really interesting time. And I would have to say, you just have to trust that what I'm sharing with you will actually work in your industry too.
And I guess
and now that actually never comes up.
Yeah, and I think that is a great lesson as well for many out there, because they will have shunned this idea of really going laser focused on who they do their best work for, because they are very secure in the knowledge that their process is applicable in a variety of different areas, that it doesn't change necessarily depending on the business model or the sector or the situation of different business types and locations and what have you. And as you pointed out, I mean, this is networking. This is you finding those centers of influence. It's getting a very intentional set of networking steps and incorporating them for business. And it is, at the end of the day, it's human to human, isn't it? Whether you think about B2B, we're still people just connecting.
100%. And we have to, and I remind people of that when people call me and they're like, I need more prospects, and can we automate this? And why don't you believe in automation? Because we do not believe in automation tools on LinkedIn. And you and I have had that conversation, right? And because in the end, these are people, right? They're profiles and Sales Navigator, they're called leads, but they're people. And we should be much more interested in the people that we're connecting with and building potential business relationships with. And I get that there are a lot of sales professionals out there that they have to make, 90 calls a day, and they've got to send out X number of connection requests. I understand that, but it also dilutes a lot on the other side. So.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten to this point now, and I'd love your opinion on this as to whether you see this as well, Colleen. But I've gotten to the point at which I'm connecting with people on LinkedIn. I'm reaching out, and there's almost like an air of surprise when it comes across as such a hyper-personalized message, when I'm making reference to things that they've recently posted or events that have happened in their business, because there's almost an expectation that a lot of this is automated now, that they're actually facing a robot, and the rise of AI messaging on LinkedIn as well, of course, where it's not really coming out of your brain anymore. So have you seen that too? Is that their expectation is that it's going to be a poor experience on LinkedIn almost?
I think 100%. And again, that goes back to they're just weary about
Yeah.
all of the messaging. And in fact, I just wrote a blog post, talking about, well, taking another contrary view that maybe not all the messaging is bad, right? Maybe there are things that you can learn, and maybe there are business challenges that you have that need to be solved, and you just don't have the right person or solution or know of the company that's doing that. And I think that's particularly relevant in all of the newness that everybody's experiencing with AI and how they need to accelerate that to become AI emergent. And we have to take in information, and there are some that are actually legitimate. However, when we're actually sending what I, personalized messages like you're talking about, compared to what I call pseudo personalized, right? Where it's looks personalized, but if you know, it could actually apply to 50 people, and we get them all the time, and everybody does. It takes discernment, and a lot of times people are looking at those messages on their phone, and they just don't have time to go through them all, right? And so taking that extra step and really personalizing it, I do think makes a huge difference. I hear about it from clients because we talk about that kind of messaging a lot. Find something, right? Make it as real as possible, because the chance is they will connect with you if they understand you are really the person behind it. And I'd like to say, right now, I'm not seeing the AI that is really coming to the forefront within LinkedIn as very good.
Colleen, talking about AI, that turns my thinking towards what's to come in the future. I know that you've got your finger on the pulse of what's happening on LinkedIn. You've seen the many, many changes on the platform over the years. I mean, I call to mind newsletters that have emerged in recent times out of the sort of long form articles format, the changes in the advertising space as well. So the iterations on the sponsored messaging capabilities and things like that. What else do you see coming out of LinkedIn? And perhaps this is not just about the features necessarily, but the ways in which people are using LinkedIn, perhaps what's working and what's not. What are the overarching trends that you're seeing right now?
Well, I'm definitely seeing a trend of it becoming more focused on like really short, brief updates. If you go back, right, in the early days of LinkedIn, it was more thought leadership driven, in my opinion, right? There were long, well thought out articles, and it was very much a place where I went to learn a lot. I have to do a little bit more digging to find those, and I've got a pretty diverse network, and a lot of people who are blogging and have written books and all of that. So I would say it's definitely more short and punchy. So it does have more of a social flavor to it, if you will. I think that one of the big things that LinkedIn has seen, certainly with the proliferation of all of the automation, is that most people want an easy button, right? They want somebody else to do it for them. So I think the biggest trend it will be over the next probably 12 to 18 months, that there will probably be bots on LinkedIn that will execute on a LinkedIn member's activities, right? Like that makes sense to me. I just can't even imagine that that's not where LinkedIn is going, right? So, and that's challenging on so many levels. And will people be comfortable doing it? Probably. I mean, they're letting a third party automated tool do it right now, right? So, but it'll be interesting to see how LinkedIn either rolls that out or how effective it is. Because again, I just do not believe that I'm not seeing their AI perform that well. It's early days for them on that piece.
Yeah.
But if you connect with somebody right now and it says then you can send a message. So I'm a big proponent of, if somebody connects with you, send them a follow-up message, then acknowledge the connection, right? The pre-populated message that I'm seeing is, hey, it's been a while since we talked. Well, no, in fact, we just connected, right? So we got to be careful. We got to be careful. And again, we want to personalize that acknowledgement. So what the trend that I would really like to see is that, again, we take the experience we have on LinkedIn and we do build relationships from it, right? We do. I mean, without LinkedIn, you and I would not be talking right now. I mean, I know a lot of people um, globally that I would not know or would have access to without using the platform. Well, and most of our clients I've never met in person.
Yeah,
So I do think, though, that the trend needs to be confirmation that you are who you say you are.
absolutely.
And I do think with so much AI and so much AI content out there, video will be increasingly more important. So again, we can actually say, yes, this is that person.
Yeah, and we've seen some of that that verification process on LinkedIn, of course.
Yeah.
I remember scanning my passport on it not too long ago, and that's going in the right direction, of course. So perhaps we will see fewer of those fake profiles as we
Yeah.
move more towards that sort of validation of profile. The other thing, and I want to pick up on the fact that you talked about short form content there, Colin, because one of the things that I've noticed, and I know a number of my consultancy clients have as well, is that there are certain formats of post of content on LinkedIn that do much, much better than others. Carousels perform better
Mhm.
than
Mhm.
image posts, for example, and polls
Mhm.
perform better than video. And video in general seems to have become less and less engaging as it's become more prolific and people almost default to video a lot of the time. So even as we get these auto start videos as we scroll through our feed, nothing's really catching our attention. And one of the things, and this, I admit, this might be putting you on the spot a little, but I'd be keen to know if you've heard this as well. But in the rumor mill, I've heard that LinkedIn are going to be releasing their own form of short video feed in the same style as Reels and TikTok and those short videos on LinkedIn as well. Is that what you've heard?
I have heard a little bit of that as well. I mean, and when you think about it, LinkedIn, just as an organization, has to compete and does see the other platforms as competitors, right?
Yeah.
It's wherever people are going to spend time. So if those short videos are what really grab people, and now that's what they're used to, and that's how they want to consume their content, LinkedIn almost has to move in that direction as well. Because number one, a lot of people want to create a certain type of content and be able to put it across platforms. So suddenly, if your platform doesn't accommodate that type of content, you lose, right? I do think, and there's some other pieces that are kind of coming out. LinkedIn's always changing the algorithm, and I am also somebody that is a believer we cannot chase the algorithm so much because it's always going to change, right? And it's smarter than the people who designed it. We're now seeing that. And we have to kind of think about what are we noticing. I'm seeing posts that have no photos in them getting traction. LinkedIn has recently come out and said, we don't need hashtags anymore. Hold your hashtags, right? We know what your content's about. We can see where it's getting engagement. We can send it out to more people. We know. So there's always been sort of a misunderstanding about how to use hashtags on LinkedIn. I see some of these posts and they have like 10 hashtags or like 7. LinkedIn's always said no more than 3 or 4 hashtags. So that's changing. The other piece that's changing, and we have to think about how we use this, they want you to stay on the platform. So when we're linking out back to our website, like we were doing to a blog post or a registration form or a landing page, some of those posts are not getting amplified. So
Yeah.
we have to, we're always testing, always seeing what does get the attention and what tends to always get attention in regardless of the format. People love to see people.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen the same. Even so far as to see And a lot of people have said LinkedIn is becoming more and more like Facebook, that people are sharing aspects of their life, a lot of their personal story. And we do like that. Again, it's that human aspect, isn't it? We seek that connection and reasons to connect and resonate with people. So we see a bit of ourselves in them, of course, and that's when the big
Mhm.
connection comes. I want to going to put you again on the spot a little bit here, Colleen. Again, I want to just talk about the future of LinkedIn. I want to look at it slightly differently. Imagine you are at the helm of LinkedIn.
Mhm.
You are chief exec, LinkedIn Incorporated. What would you do with LinkedIn in the next 5 or 10 years to make it the best possible servant of its users?
Oh, that's such a fabulous question. No one has ever asked me that question. Um, I would probably rethink and relaunch groups, affinity groups, and really kind of energize that whole component. They do not have the cachet that they did once upon a time. They lost that cachet because they became just another place for salespeople to pitch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that really diluted that group. However, I do know people who run and are the face of their company through their groups, and it continues to be a really strong place for them to communicate and build community. So I would look at ways where we can build more intentional community
Yeah.
within the general platform.
I find it
Right?
interesting because there is this huge wave of awareness and desire around community right now.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many
Yeah.
businesses who have recognized that those that almost, yes, own the community. Yes, there's always going to be a business development and a sales angle. It's difficult to get away from that.
Right.
But there is huge value in creating that connection with communities of be it your ideal client profile, be it your eventual user audience, be it a community of partners and referrers. So, I mean, and it really strikes me, as you're alluding to, I guess, that LinkedIn haven't put an ounce of effort into that and making it work.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you go back to HubSpot's inbound conference over the last 2 years, and 2 years ago, so that would have been 2022, they actually talked about how inbound was not driving the results that it had been, right? They came out, I was watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, listen to them talking about this. And I was speaking at a group of CEOs, and one person said, I just came back from inbound. I'm like, well, what was their answer? And they said, community. HubSpot recognizes we need to build community. And I think LinkedIn has kind of missed that opportunity in some ways. They've left a lot up to the member, if you think about it, right? The member can build a group, but now groups aren't, again, lost the cachet. You can build a network. But I think that there's other opportunities for LinkedIn. I would say the other piece that, and we're seeing this with AI. So this emergence over the last year and a half, Matt, with AI, I kind of feel like I'm having deja vu from like 2011 when I started in Tarot and saw people trying to figure out LinkedIn, and now they're trying to figure out AI. And so much of it is around best practices and training and coaching. You can't just give people a tool and say, here you go, right? Because then they figure out from their own devices, like, and not physical devices, but like, like, how do I use this? And they don't always go very deep. So there's this continual superficial level of knowledge and proficiency where they miss the real power. They miss the power on LinkedIn with AI and what they need to know to become more effective and efficient. So I see this very parallel. And what LinkedIn, if I had been CEO, if I was CEO, I'd be like, we've got to really help our members learn how to use this platform in a different way and have a partner program, much like Microsoft does, right? They're owned by Microsoft now. And I remember being at LinkedIn years and years ago, and they'd be like, you have a business teaching people how to use LinkedIn? It's like a do-it-yourself tool. And I'm like, for you, but you're building a rocket for like 5 years from now. And a lot of people are trying to figure out how they started a second profile inadvertently, right? Or like who they should really connect with. So it's a fascinating time to me. And a lot of the conversation I'm hearing and participating in around AI, because I'm like trying to learn and have become a student. I've tried to be a student for the last 18 months. Um, it's all in the nuance. It's all in the detail. It's all in the push the next button kind of mindset to me.
I love that. I think you dealt with that left field question very, very well, Colleen, by the way. Let me bring it back to your role as a consultancy leader, and I'd love to learn more about that. And let's again put you in those shoes back in the early days of consultancy. What advice do you wish that you'd received as a consultancy leader when you were first starting out, and what advice would you give to others at that stage of their journey?
Well, I had to do some reverse engineering. Most people start a consultancy because they have deep expertise in a particular topic, field, industry, right? And that's their nucleus. I decided that I wanted to start my own business. I thought it was going to be one thing. I started networking, and I literally probably took 80 people to coffee over a 6 week period of time. And I said, what was the hardest thing about starting your own business? And these were all agency, consultancy types of people.
Yeah.
And to a person, Matt, they said business development. And so came home and I'm like, wow, that's actually all I know how to do. Where am I going to focus? And so when I realized that there was this window with LinkedIn, and I had already been in LinkedIn for 6 years, right? I had already been working in it. But I just really needed to really amp up that expertise. A lot of times people leave large organizations or an organization of any size with this deep expertise, but they don't understand the business development part. And so while I wasn't, while I needed to figure out how I was going to do business development to build this, I actually had the skill set to do that, right? And I think that as I've talked to lots of people who are starting their business over the years, like, what's your business development plan? How are you going to make sure you do it consistently? How do you, especially if you're delivering that service to, right? So I was really fortunate in that I understood how critical the business development portion was, and I was comfortable doing it. And a lot of times people want to hand that, they're like, I'm just going to hire somebody to do that. But that person doesn't have the same expertise and insight as you do to create that initial credibility, especially in that early stage of the business. So it's like, that's a big challenge, I think, for a lot of people starting a consultancy.
Absolutely. And Colleen, building on that aspect of, that advice that you wish you'd heard early on, what, in terms of skill sets as well, what do you think have been the best skills that you've developed as a consultant, and you think that every consultancy really has to have in their toolkit?
I think it's being really intentional about doing great work. And, especially with all of the platforms and all of the noise, we can get very distracted very quickly. And when I started in tarot, I was one of 10 in the world that was doing this work. I mean, we counted them, and I was friends with the other 9, right? Like I knew them from, somebody was in Canada, somebody was in Spain, West Coast, Belgium. I mean, it was really interesting. And a group of us came together, and this was probably about 6 years in. So we had built up a pretty good size revenue stream. And I was listening to this group talk about Well, collectively, we have, 200,000 Twitter followers and 93,000 LinkedIn connections. And we need to have 150,000 LinkedIn connections because there was some talk about maybe coming together and create a collective. And I finally said, you know what? I'm actually don't think I belong in this group. And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, I actually don't care about social influence. I need to be influential with the people that matter, that can write checks, that can hire us. And I'm not chasing followers, right? They're like, of all the people here, you've actually built a really great business and you have the strongest revenue. How did you do it if you weren't all about social influence? And I was like, by doing good work, by doing the work, right? So sometimes we can get very, very distracted. And let me just say, it is not that I wasn't distracted with other things, right? It's just that on that one topic, I was like really clear. If we do a good job for you, you'll probably recommend us to somebody, and then we'll get some calls from that. And I built a very deliberate business development channel, right? So I was really clear, and I worked that business development channel, and to this day it still continues to drive a lot of our new business opportunity. And that came through speaking and again, doing the work. But I found speaking at events and within certain groups for this particular channel to drive the most revenue for us. It wasn't, again, I didn't have to have 25,000 LinkedIn connections. So again, be really clear what you're going to go after, and the work typically is what will speak for itself.
That's an amazing lesson. I think we forget that sometimes, and we are, as you pointed out earlier on, so many consultancies are in business development mode. That is their biggest challenge. It continues to be, whatever state of the economy we tend to be in, whatever the business cycle of the week seems to be, that is a constant. It's always there. And so we can get our head turned by this idea of growing influence and brand awareness and doing the next thing that's going to get us that spotlight shone on us, that's going to tell people, look, we're here and this is what we do. And if that's something you need, then come and talk to us. But at the end of the day, doing the great work is a non-negotiable, isn't it?
It's a non-negotiable. And where I am, there's as in every city, there's a lot of, networking events, right? And I did them early on, right? And at some point, like I said yes to a lot of things, and it was in gathering mode. So again, what stage of the business are you in? And today, rather than going to an event where there might be 50 or 100 people, I'd rather be more intentional, look at my network. Who do I want to talk to? And even if we're on Zoom, right? And you and I do this, we've done this a number of times. We just haven't talked in a while. I'd love to catch up.
Yeah.
And that one-on-one is much, I just find it more rewarding at this point and enjoy it better. I do have a great friend. He's in a mastermind. We're in a mastermind together. And he has a rule. And as I've coached people, I've really encouraged them to consider this rule, which is whenever he would go to an event, he had a goal. He wanted to leave with business cards of 3 new people. So he would say to the people, because inevitably we go to a networking event, and we know some people there. Sorry, I'm not talking to you tonight, Matt, because I'm here to meet 3 new people. And when he would meet those new people, he would leave.
Wow.
Right. And he would walk up to people and say, hey, tell me why you decided to come here. But it was that, to me, is like super intentional networking too. Right. I'm coming to this networking. Hey, we can catch up anytime. Let's have a coffee. And he's brilliant at networking. But when it was an event, 3, and then I'm going to go home and have dinner with my children. And I love this intentionality about the networking, as opposed to, again, just sort of trying to cover as much ground as possible and never almost feel like we're treading water.
And it pulls you out of that comfort zone that we all get dragged into, of talking to the
Yeah.
people we know and that we've seen before. And mind you, it'd be bang out of luck with me because I haven't had business cards in so long. But that's something else. And of course, we can do that LinkedIn thing,
Yeah.
can't we? We can bump
Right.
them
Our
together.
QR code and bump our
Yeah,
phones together.
the
Yeah.
tech is there. The tech
Yeah.
is there. Colleen, you've known me for a little while now. You know I'm never just going to do things by the book when it comes to this podcast or anything else that I do. So we're going to get into snog, marry, avoid. It's a little bit different. It's not literal. I'm not going to ask for your secret crush, but the snog is a quick win. And so for those who are listening, what's one quick win in this world of consultancy in which we operate that everyone needs to know about?
There's a level of serendipity in everything, and you never know where that next opportunity is going to come from.
Love that.
And that's sort of my philosophy about LinkedIn too, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to be open to seeing a possibility.
Yeah, and a little bit random as well, you know, not just batting away these opportunities because you feel like they might be just another chancer, just another salesperson trying to vie for your attention.
Yeah, so just be open, be curious.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, marry. What is one essential, one tool, one strategy, a practice, something that you couldn't live without in this consultancy space?
Knowing people and being known by people. You have to be known by the people that you want to do business with, right? And there's no way you can do it alone. You have to rely on other people to hire you, to refer you, to deliver work for you. So again, I think we are highly, highly reliant on building really authentic connections, and I mean connection, not just a connection on LinkedIn, and having conversations with people and helping people and asking for help.
And lastly, avoid. And I think I might have an idea what this might be from you, but what is the one thing that you think we need to ditch in consultancy that you've realized you needed to get rid of as soon as possible? Just get rid of that thing, get it in the trash.
I love a shiny new object. And so, I am right there. Let's try this. The good part of that is I try a lot of things. And the bad part is I try a lot of things. And I have learned over the last probably 2-3 years to calm that and do the work. Yeah. Do the work.
I must admit, I thought you were going to throw automation in there as well.
Well, that's just a given.
That's a given.
That's just a given.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely a given.
Colleen, we've discussed some amazing topics, everywhere from your experience as a consultancy leader. I really value your expertise in that area, as well as your obvious expertise on LinkedIn. I think you've given us some incredible and very practical tips as well today. So thank you so much for being with us today. Listen, where can people find you? And also do tell us about your book as well, and where people can find that, where people can connect with you.
So connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's Colleen McKenna, Intero Advisory. Our website is interoadvisory.com. My book is on Amazon. It's Business Not Social. And again, while it was written a few years ago, 2021, I think, it's all about those best practices and many of the things that we've talked about today, right? And but I am easily found on LinkedIn. Even though there are a number of Colleen McKennas, you can find me.
What a surprise. It'll be LinkedIn. Colleen, thanks so much again for being with us today. And go check out Colleen and connect with her on LinkedIn. And if you can get that connection with her, then you'll be all the better for it. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.